And I would like to ask Thomas to take the floor to give us his presentation, contribution about web-based 3D platforms and metadata for cultural heritage and why. As I mentioned at the beginning, at the end of the day, we have to present this knowledge. We have to present this memory and this identity somewhere. In the virtual space, these are platforms. We still have some platforms are running around the world. You may know them very well. And okay, but if we say on a holistic approach to document the past and preserve it, then we need to take a couple of important issues into consideration. And Thomas, the floor is yours, and you can explain to us what it is all about.
Right, thank you, Marinos. Can everybody see my screen in the meantime?
Yes, crystal clear.
Thanks, thank you. So yes, my name is Thomas. I'm a researcher at the Cyprus University of Technology and a Marie Curie Fellow within the EU-funded Change project. So very briefly about the project, Change trains about 15 early-stage researchers to develop new methodologies for monitoring cultural heritage. And I'm one of them, ESR 14, working on the enrichment of 3D volumetric data with metadata and semantics. And if you want more information about the project, I'd like to invite you to visit the website that's written on the slide. So today I'd like to start a discussion on online platforms which store and visualize cultural heritage content in 3D. Now, despite the increasing number of three-dimensional model portals and online repositories for cultural heritage, there are very few recent academic publications that offer critical analysis when reviewing their potential for cultural heritage. And we believe that it is important to analyze these platforms in depth to reveal their potential for the sector. So in our lab, we are particularly interested in if these online platforms currently provide a comprehensive and consistent metadata and paradata structure. And secondly, we're trying to find out what features they currently offer that could be useful or beneficial rather to the cultural heritage sector. Now, for the purpose of this short presentation, I will not review all of them, but rather focus on a selection of 5 commercial and 5 institutional 3D repositories that are used by the cultural heritage community, and then analyze them according to their metadata and cultural heritage functionalities. So first up, metadata and paradata. Now, to use 3D as a credible resource, be it for research or to monitor the state of conservation of cultural heritage, we believe that metadata is absolutely essential. I think Marinos and Rafael already pointed this out earlier, because without context, the 3D that is presented on these platforms or elsewhere has a risk of losing its meaning without the necessary metadata. And when we're talking about metadata, we need to consider all types of metadata that are relevant to 3D cultural heritage. So not only the information on the physical, real-world cultural heritage asset, but also on the digitization process and the information about the 3D models that are representing these real-world objects. So I'm just going to go through some of the more well-known 3D platforms to illustrate how they handle metadata and paradata. And first up is the Smithsonian 3D platform. So on the right, you can see that the Smithsonian provides very detailed information about the cultural heritage object itself. So for example, its current location, identification number, and so on. Whereas if we look at Sketchfab, for example, one of the, if not the most popular commercial 3D platform, where the user is free to include any metadata they want in the free-form description. However, as you can imagine, this hardly ever happens or doesn't happen in a consistent way. So instead, Sketchfab pulls metadata from the 3D model that you upload. So you have information about the 3D resource, such as the number of vertices, file size, file format, and so on. And then the last example in this section is Europeana. So Europeana has a very powerful and advanced search engine, which has a useful 3D filter as well. So you can filter for only content that has been rendered in 3D. However, most of this so-called 3D is represented as a flat 2D image with no information about the 3D object itself, nor how the cultural heritage site or object has been digitized. And this last point is crucial, because if you look at this brief overview of the more popular 3D platforms I just presented, none of them provide a structured way to include information about the digitization process, which is here the last row that you can see in this table. So, and this makes it very difficult to interpret or use or reuse the 3D that is presented on these platforms. And this is an overview of the commercial platforms. And a similar trend can be seen for the institutional repositories with regards to metadata on the digitization process or project. So, and for the last three platforms, you see here 3D Hub, Universal Viewer, and Poetry. It all really depends on the implementation of the open source code by the institutions that make use of them. So it's difficult to have a final say about this, about their implementation of metadata in this table, because basically it depends on how the organizations and institutions use these 3D viewers. And it would be interesting to see how these tools can be combined to overcome some of the gaps that we will identify in this presentation. So again, also in the institutional viewers and repositories, they have a severe lack of providing data on the digitization process. Now, moving on to the second criterion for the comparative analysis. This time looking at the visualization and interaction functionalities that these platforms have to offer for the cultural heritage field. So coming back to again to Sketchfab, they have a really solid annotation system. It's quite simple, but at the same time very powerful. And the way they use annotations, this can be very useful for heritage interpretation purposes. If we then look at 3D Hub, this is an implementation of 3D Hub where they added measurement tools. So if the model is scaled, you can actually measure the cultural heritage object. And some platforms like Poetry, for example, they even allow you to measure area, surface area, and volume. Last example here is Scan the World, and this is an initiative that is part of my Mini Factory, which is a platform predominantly meant for providing 3D print-ready models. But they also have some useful features for cultural heritage interpretation and research, such as this section tool. So you can make horizontal and vertical slices. So again, this is just a small sample to show what kind of features that are currently available in online 3D platforms. And as you can see, many of the commercial platforms, so this is again just commercial platforms, many of these are lacking the more advanced tools, such as measuring, annotations, and section. Now, as a rule, institutional platforms, they are better equipped to respond to the needs of the cultural heritage sector and more often provide these more advanced features because they were designed, of course, for the cultural heritage field. So after this brief overview, the question remains how we can work towards, let's say, a holistic way of of representing 3D cultural heritage in an online environment. Because the issue here is that while some of these, or let's say, some of these features that are listed here that would be desirable to combine in a single one-stop shop platform, they are indeed covered by some of the existing repositories and viewers, but none of them really provides the holistic picture, which would be very, very useful to do if we want to make 3D a valuable tool for heritage conservation research purposes. So, and from this list of desirable features, I'd like to highlight two of them, just to illustrate what can or should be done to work towards this holistic platform. And, this is an implementation again of 3D Hop, just another example to illustrate the power of a more layered approach. You can see on the right-hand side the different sections or rooms or architectural elements that you can select on this building, and this here represented in 3D, and the linkage of those elements to the whole building. And these are concepts that are borrowed from other types of digital tools for cultural heritage, like GIS or BIM, for example, what Raphael was talking about earlier. And I believe this is important. I mean, it's a very simple execution, but it's very important because I think, well, objects, and with objects I mean artifacts, for example, movable cultural heritage objects. Well, these objects are currently reasonably well represented in the existing 3D platforms. I think buildings still remain particularly challenging to visualize, let alone villages or whole towns or cities. I believe it's very hard to visualize individual rooms or architectural elements while still linking them to the overall building. And of course, annotations like on Sketchfab, they can certainly help guide the users through the building or the 3D model of the building. But in this case, also providing isolated elements while playing with the opacity of the model would also help with this in this regard. But it remains a very big challenge to accurately represent buildings, features of buildings in a single 3D model. Now, and a second desirable feature is the addition of an adequate paradata structure. And these are just some of the elements that would be important to consider rendering 3D more valuable as a source for research and conservation. So a potential solution is to make use of the existing open source tools to make use of them and to combine them on a single website, like, for example, what CIDOC or Digital Global Heritage are doing, combining several viewers and their individual capabilities to represent a cultural heritage scene in 3D. Now, and this is an implementation on Global Digital Heritage. It's a cultural heritage site in France. And as you can see below the image of the cultural heritage site, they use different viewers of platforms to demonstrate different parts of this complex site. And I'm not sure if you can, no, you can't see all of them, but they also, so they use 3D Hop, they use Poetry, but they also use Sketchfab to present different elements of this monument. However, this still has some disadvantages because these models are not really linked to each other. There's no real integration between the different viewers. So even if I would select one of those separate rooms, it would be impossible for me to know where in the building this room is specifically situated, or to which side of the facade some architectural elements belong to. So these are just disjointed models, which are part of the bigger whole, but we have no clue where they belong. So this is a very commendable effort, and I really like this approach, but I think we need to find a way to really integrate these models with each other and to link them together. So as part of the research of the Change project, we'd like to propose a system that is schematized here in a very simple way. So the pyramid is the pyramid that you see on the slide represents a 3D model of cultural heritage assets, so either movable or immovable, as a result of one or more data acquisition techniques. And so the idea is that through data and metadata enrichment of the 3D objects, so adding this paradata and metadata to the 3D objects, but also other digital media like images or video or audio, through the enrichment of the 3D model, we are able to reveal the story of the object. But we're also able to, or that's the ideal. We'd like also to monitor change through this enriched 3D models. And ideally, this should all come together in an accessible online environment, which should be easy to access by a variety of users and stakeholders. So at the end of the day, this research project will be working towards a structure to organize metadata and paradata for 3D, but also a methodology for using 3D models as resources for conservation and research, and an online framework for data enrichment and semantic links, or at least a pilot of the platform. Now, there are still some roadblocks towards the development of a holistic solution. Some of them are included here on the slide, like the accuracy of the model, how to convey authenticity in 3D, but also the question of ownership rights or copyright. For example, if 3D models generated by photogrammetry follow the same copyright rules as photographs, there's lots of questions and discussions going on in this relatively new field that need to be overcome to work towards this holistic solution. So, and to conclude, and this is linked to these challenges, very much linked to these challenges, as Marinos already introduced in his presentation, the Cyprus University of Technology recently won the call for tenders to develop an EU study on quality and 3D digitization of tangible cultural heritage. And we are working with a wide range of partners from academia, but also the industry, NGOs, international organizations such as ICOMOS and UNESCO. And the commission of this study is a clear sign that on the European Union level, they are acknowledging the lack of standards on digitization of cultural heritage in general. And I think the outcomes of this study, which will be finishing in late spring next year, will also, or may also better inform us about the way forward for online 3D cultural heritage platforms. So, and a big part of this is, as I tried to explain earlier, the lack of a standard for metadata and paradata for 3D cultural heritage objects, as this is severely hampering the potential use of 3D cultural heritage resources online. So we have high hopes for this study, and we are looking forward to work together with the experts and the partners towards the basis for guidelines in the field of digitization of 3D cultural heritage. Yeah. So with the study, I'd like to thank you for your attention.